Welcome to another episode of Indaba, the African Debate. My name is Mduduzi Brian, and as usual, thank you very much for joining me today. I have a special guest, as always. I'm not going to introduce her. She'll introduce herself. Let's dive in.
Hi, how are you? Um, my name is Suzanne Silantoi. I'm from Kenya. I'm a public policy analyst by profession. I work in the NGO space where we do behavior change communication, mostly in healthcare and agriculture. I also run a YouTube channel as well and a podcast platform known as Is That So with Silantoi. And the main aim of this channel is to just give information about government so that people understand how to engage better. And hopefully we can raise a politically empowered generation. So this is mostly information about Kenya, but we do try to go into other spaces as well. I'm also, I've been involved in active politics before. In the last Kenyan election, which was in 2017, I vied for the Nairobi senatorial seat as the youngest candidate, and I was an independent candidate as well. I did not win. So I am not the senator of Nairobi, in case you're wondering. So yeah, that's it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Guys, as always, what I'll do is I will put down her YouTube channel and all her sort of podcast information in the description box below. If you're listening to on Spotify, we will give the names as we go along as well, so you can search for them on YouTube. Let's start with the Senate elections. What happened? What was your inspiration? I mean, at 23 years old, a lot of us at 23 were probably thinking, wow, what do I do with my life next? But you sort of had it figured out that this is what I want to do. What was your inspiration behind that?
Well, I wouldn't say that I had it figured out. What I would say is I was working in the health space, and at the time I was very frustrated because we used to work directly with government, and I was quite frustrated by just the services, and I felt that government wasn't working as it should. And so I made a choice to actually try and do something to fix it myself. so therefore I decided to get into Senate. So for us in Kenya, how Senate works is we have a devolved system of government, and so Senate is the one that deals with those devolved units. And one of the main functions of the devolved units is actually healthcare. And so I felt that getting into Senate would actually help me impact healthcare in Kenya directly. So that's why I chose Senate. Some people may say it may have been a moment of madness because I was 23. But no, I think I was really passionate about my country, and I was passionate about doing something meaningful to contribute towards it. And so at that time, I thought that was the best route, and I did it. So that's actually why I got into politics. It was out of frustration.
Now, they do say some genius moments come from moments of madness. So, it could have been a
Exactly.
masterstroke in the direction of your life. Now, how was the whole
I like to
experience?
think so.
How was the whole experience being involved in elections, the
Yeah.
aftermath, finding out that you hadn't won? How was that whole experience, the emotions, and of course, the whole bureaucracy around it? How was it?
Wow. I think that experience is something that something like I have never experienced before. Elections are really intense.
Yeah.
I don't think people talk much about how intense the electioneering period can be. But it was a very interesting experience. I like to say interesting because it had both good and bad um,
Yeah.
experiences in one. Um, but at the end of the day, like, it was quite a learning experience for me. For the first time I was able to interact with politics on a one-on-one level. I think a lot of times, as young people, really, we always see it as a peripheral thing, like something that is almost a mystical figure. But actually getting
Yeah.
involved right in the thick of it was quite a learning experience for me. I I had some very good experiences with, people who were quite open-minded about my candidature. I In Kenya, we have a very individual centered kind of politics. Also, you can say like a party politics, but most of our parties are actually revolving around individuals, and they change every election cycle, which is quite different from parties in other parts of the continent and also of the world. So it was quite interesting to see people respond to someone who is an independent candidate who's quite young. It was also quite interesting because unfortunately, in Kenya, we have politics that's also centered around tribe, which is quite the trend in other parts of the continent as well. And I happen to come from a minority tribe. So it was also quite interesting to interact with politics from that sense, just because most people who vie for seats like Nairobi is the capital, would ideally be from specific tribes because they probably get more votes. So it was quite interesting because a lot of people were very receptive of my candidature. They actually gave me an audience. So yeah, that really gave me motivation that, actually people are open to some kind of a different kind of politics. And so that made me feel really good. Of course, there was a bad side of it where it just showed me the rot when it comes to the electoral process, the whole engagement with voters through money and just basically voter bribery, really, which was something that I experienced in a sense that people would ask me for money, and I wouldn't give it, and so maybe some people would react badly. But yeah, all in all, it was quite an interesting experience, just priceless learning experience for me. Yeah.
Now, having said that, one thing that really still sticks, of course,
I
in your
forgot to
story.
mention something.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention something. You told me about. I mean, you wanted me to also talk about the end of the process and finding out that I didn't win. I actually ended up getting about 32,000 votes, over 32,000 votes, and that actually really motivated me in terms of a small girl from nowhere could actually convince 32,000 people to vote for. I'm like, yeah, actually, this is something that is hope. There's hope for the country in the sense that I could be able to follow a specific line of politics, which is just try and explain my ideas, my views, and sell it without giving money. And some people could actually buy into it. And so that gave me a lot of hope for the country, really. And so I didn't feel as bad losing, knowing that there's actually people who we can convert their minds and just have some sort of different type of conversation in politics in the future. So it was a great experience overall.
32,000 votes. I generally know some people that have went to the polls and got 2 votes. So 32,000 votes. That's amazing, honestly. And it's not easy to get just the 2 votes as well. I'm not putting down the 2 votes. It's not easy to get those 2 votes. So to get 32,000, it shows that there was a vision there and there was a belief there. And those two are very important in the politics sphere, because you've got to have a vision and people have to believe in the vision that you have. So that's impressive. But one thing that still sticks for me is you were 23 years old, and at 23, do you feel there's room for young people in African politics in general?
The thing that I've seen is that young people are needed. In fact, they are necessary in the political process. And so it's how we play our role in this that determines how we end up. And so a lot of times we're often used as the mobilizers, the people with the votes, the majority, being the majority. And then at the end of the day, our interests are thrown out because probably we don't have as much financial muscle, or we don't have we don't have the party backings or something, because we're not the owners of these parties, we're not the drivers of the conversation. And so we end up being miscellaneous, to say the least. However, the thing that I noticed about being a candidate without necessarily looking towards these influences to make a difference, I saw that people took me seriously in the sense that I was not beating anybody else's drum. I wasn't looking to get any sort of affirmation from someone. I had something to say and I decided to say it, and people took me seriously. And so I think just based on my experience alone, that means there's a lot of space for young people in this field, as long as we come out assertively, well informed, and make our statements known, and guide the conversation. Because at the end of the day, if democracy is about numbers, then young people should really be able to control that kind of system, because of the muscle that we have just in terms of the sheer masses. And then at the end of the day, we can get a seat at the table and drive conversation towards matters that affect us most. So I think there's a really big space that young people need to tap into, just so that we can be able to fill in that gap. Yeah.
Now, I asked this question because a lot of young people say, I don't want to get involved in politics at the moment because it's not the right time. So I always often ask, well, what is the right time? And one of the questions that one of the answers they give me is that, listen, Brian, at the moment, everything, the power is not held by us. It is held by the older guys, the custodians, if you wish. They hold all the power to the military, they hold the power to the police, they hold the power to everything. So even if I were to get involved today, I'll be intimidated out of the space. And some often cite Bobby Wine in Uganda, that look at what's happening to him. I wouldn't want that. And they cite a lot of other young activists across the continent that are doing amazing things. So did that cross your mind at all, something along those lines, that they are custodians of these things, and these custodians might not be overly keen for me to take up this position and take up the space?
In all honesty, no. It did not cross my mind one bit. This space belonged to someone else. And I think now when I got into it, I was like, oh, okay. Eventually is when I realized, oh yeah, actually, by the way, this is actually a space for other people. Like, it's occupied by other people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is actually not a space for just them. In my mind, in my understanding, I am a citizen of this country. I pay my taxes. So why the hell not why can't I contribute to this conversation? Why can't I contribute to government? Why can't I get into politics? Who said politics is for the old people? And I think this is a stereotype that has been driven now. But if we look at the history of our countries, even in the entire African continent, most of the people who fought for independence were young people. In Kenya, we have the time when people were fighting for democracy. We call it the second liberation. Yeah. This thing was driven by students of the university. And those are the people who are still in power now. So if you tell me that this space is not for young people, I'm like, no, actually history tells us otherwise. It's actually the young people who drove change into our countries. And so these people drove that change, got into these spaces, and then made us believe this is not our space. I think it's a lie that has continued to be perpetuated and kind of needs to end. And so young people should know that this is our space. And as much as this is our country and we pay taxes in that same breath, then this is also your space politically. So don't be intimidated. I mean, no one is going to give up power easily for anyone. It's a given. And so you have to know that it's tough. It's a difficult battle. You have to prepare your mind for that. But at the end of the day, it is your space. So right, like it's rightfully your space. Yeah, it's yours and it's yours for you to play.
Brilliant, precisely. Now, I want us to quickly sort of fast forward the conversation to what's been going on in Kenya over the past sort of, I think it's close to about a year now, isn't it?
Maybe 2 years.
Is this... Wow. Yeah. There's this BBI bill that has been taking up the space. what is BBI and why is it so controversial in Kenya at the moment?
Okay. So now, for us to understand BBI, we have to go back to the last election. So in the last election,
Yes.
we had a presidential election that was nullified by the Supreme Court. And then we had a second election. And between the month of like August 2017 to about like March-ish, there was a lot of turmoil in the country politically because of how people didn't really agree on the results of the election, and then how the second election was done. So there was a lot of political turmoil at the time. And so the president and the main opposition leader decided to come together and fix it. And so there was a famous handshake. So that is what we usually refer to in terms of like they made peace. And so that handshake kicked off the BBI process. And BBI just means the Building Bridges Initiative. So ideally what they did was try to find out, okay, so what is wrong with the country and how can we fix it? At the end of the day, this process led up to the solution being that the constitution needs to be changed. And they came up with a whole secretariat that collected views from the country and came up with a set of changes for the constitution that they think would fix the country's problems and end perennial election violence. So then that's how they developed the BBI bill. So this has been controversial because a lot of people who there's people against it and for it, obviously, but it has been driven as an initiative of the president to change the constitution. And so people went to the court. Oh no, I should actually mention, since it's a process of changing the constitution through a popular initiative, it had to go through they had to collect like a set of signatures to kick off the referendum process. It had to go through the county assemblies because, as I mentioned, we do have a devolved system of government. And then it goes to the National Assembly, both Parliament and the Senate.
Yeah.
And then after that, it should be presented to the president, who will assent to it. And then a referendum would be held in 90 days after that. But then throughout this process, there was so much politics around it, and legislators were openly bribed to make the bill pass. And so there's a lot of controversy about just the process of developing this and the process of it going through approval by the county assemblies and the National Assembly. And so people went to court just to find out the constitutionality of this whole process. And so I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, the High Court, which is our constitutional court, ruled that the entire process was unconstitutional, and they pronounced that the president had actually violated his mandate as provided in the constitution, because he's not supposed to change the constitution. And how the constitution was set up is we can't have a popular initiative that's led by the president, given our history, just because our constitution has been changed quite a number of times by people in power to suit their interests. And so the constitution as it is now in Kenya would actually limit presidents from doing that, so that they don't extend their terms, they don't change the core structure of the constitution, they don't change the core structure of the executive. And that's exactly what they were trying to do with this BBI bill. And so the reason why I think people are really talking about it is because, so this court actually ruled against the sitting president and pronounced that he is actually in contravention of the law and that he could be held personally liable for these actions. And that's why this whole thing is very controversial. And that's why it's probably making news in other parts of the continent. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's what the BBI is about.
Now, I'm going to really put you on the spot here and say, in your perspective, the amendments that were made to the Constitution, were they good for Kenya in general? Were they good for the East African region in general? Were they positive, or were they wholly negative in your perspective?
Okay. First, it is to say that there were a set of recommendations, a set of amendments that would have been considered for the referendum, and so some of them are good, and some of them are not so great, or they don't have any validity to explain why they're needed. So you would find also the entire process really was driven in a way to garner like support when it really did not require that kind of support. For example, they made recommendations for some changes to be made for young people, and some of the suggestions were that young people should get like a 7-year tax break if they're starting new businesses, or they should have a grace period of about 4 years before they start repaying their student loans. And then another one was about having a national youth council committee, something like that, a commission. Yes, a national youth commission. The challenge with this is that these are 3 issues that are affecting young people. But only one of them actually falls within the constitutional amendment bill, which is actually going to be an amendment of the constitution. The other 2 were suggested as legislative items. But then it's driven, so it's not in the actual thing that we're going to be considering in the election. And those are the 2 main things that young people are after. And so it is driven as though, okay, it's a youth-friendly constitutional amendment. However, it's actually the most beneficial aspect about it is not actually in the constitution. And even the formation of a youth commission is kind of like counterproductive because we already have a national youth council. So it's like, so what are we introducing? What exactly is new here? And so those are some of the challenges with it. Some of the best proposals were actually not in the actual constitutional amendment bill, which we should be considering in the referendum, which makes it a little bit tricky. It seems like they're lying to people. And in my opinion, that isn't great. It's just deceiving people. They also propose to change the structure of the executive and add about 70 more constituencies. There's nothing wrong with having a different structure of the executive. They were looking to have a prime minister and 2 deputy prime ministers. There's nothing explicitly wrong with it. It's just that, is it necessary?
That's exactly what I was going to ask. That is it necessary?
Yeah, is it necessary? Yeah. So that's the main issue with this. With some of the proposals they were making, and even outside the proposals, just the drive to change the constitution in the midst of a global pandemic. The timing just seemed a little bit off. The government should have been focusing on things like vaccination and just making sure we're out of this pandemic and our economy has been salvaged. And there's little talk about that. The main talk is about constitutional amendment, and it's like, what's the hurry, guys? Can we deal with the global pandemic first before we change the constitution? And so those are just some of the things that were a little bit they were tricky. They were just a bit sketchy, to be quite frank. And so those are some of the reasons that I had some reservations about it. Just the relevance of what they're proposing, because it doesn't really explain why they're proposing what they're proposing, and also the timing of it. Why now? Why not wait for us to be out of the woods with the pandemic and then probably discuss this constitutional amendment later? So yeah, those are some of the challenges with that.
It sounds very how can I put it? It sounds like most African countries have this, where they have 2 deputy presidents, 2 deputy prime ministers, that sort of thing, which sometimes you ask yourself, is it necessary?
Yeah.
But you see why some of them do it. They do it as in, okay, this can be occupied by this tribe and this one by this tribe. So you kind of give an illusion more than anything else. And I emphasize it's an illusion that there's a certain level of equality involved in all of this. Personally, I don't think it works. I just think that in any case, as soon as you bring up all those tribal divides again to say you should do this, you should have that, it really just puts it back to square one, because essentially, the other tribe just feels we're only confined to deputy minister one, other one we're only confined to deputy minister two.
Yeah, this
So,
is our place.
so yeah, so it just never really works, and I'm just always thinking, what's the alternative system? How do we bridge all the gaps that we have when it comes to the tribal issues? Because it's not unique to one certain African country. It's very, it's everywhere. And you look at some countries that have 300 different ethnic groups. You can't have 300 different deputy prime ministers. So how do you bridge that gap of politics and tribal lines? Is it possible at all?
In my humble view, I think the tribal issue is blown out of proportion in this sense. I think our parties have been quite lazy when it comes to mobilization. So they choose to mobilize in a tribal sense because it's easy. The moment people start talking about your ethnicity, then you kind of get defensive. You start, acting in an irrational manner because these are your people. Yep. And so this has been the model of mobilization in our continent, which is just lazy from our politicians. And so they keep us from not talking about the real issues and tell us that the reason why you're where you are is because of your tribe. Yeah. Unfortunately, our regions, sometimes our districts, our counties, or whatever your country is divided in, would end up having a specific group of people living in a specific place just because of how history has been or where we are originally from. And therefore, when it comes to things like distribution of resources, which is not done appropriately, so it ends up affecting a specific tribe in a specific way. And therefore, once, that specific tribe will have a specific set of issues because of its circumstance, not necessarily because of its tribe. And so instead of equally distributing the resources and making sure that we're all having the same playing field, they use the tribe card to justify why some people are going through some things, when in real sense, it doesn't matter what tribe these people are from. It's just about a system that is unable to equally distribute resources. And so my opinion is, if resources are distributed properly, if we deal with corruption, and therefore, people get appointments on merit, then it will stop being a tribal issue. Because at the end of the day, you won't even care who is at the top. If your systems are working, then you really will not care who is your president or whether your tribesman gets the deputy president. It really won't matter for you. So for as long as we don't deal with our equitable resources of equitable distribution of resources, and we don't deal with the corruption issue, then people will continue to use the tribe card to justify things, when in real sense, that's probably not the issue. So that's I think that's my opinion on that.
I mean, that's brilliant. It's a different way of sort of looking at it, and it's probably a school of thought that I hadn't really fully subscribed to. So I appreciate that, because now I'm seeing it from a different perspective. Now, to quickly round off the BBI sort of issue, where to now for BBI? After the courts, what's going on? Are they going to try and push it again? Is this happening at all? Is it going to happen, or is it another 2 years of talking about BBI nonstop?
So, so because the case was in the High Court, they can appeal either to the Court of Appeal. If they're not satisfied, they can appeal to the Supreme Court. Then at that point, if the Supreme Court says no, then that's it, it's over. But also the court declared that there's nothing stopping them from starting this process again and following procedure. The only challenge with this is that if they follow the correct procedure, then it might interfere with our next election, which should be next year in August. And so that doesn't allow, the time frame does not really allow them to start this process again. So we're to see what the the Court of Appeal will say. If they decide to go to the Supreme Court, we're yet to see what that is. But as for now, the court said we're not having a referendum, which is quite it's monumental for us, because this has been a thing that has been driven by the president. So it's just interesting to see the court stopping a thing that a sitting president is doing. So we're waiting to see. We're not very sure, but we'll definitely keep you posted.
Definitely. Again, I say I'll put down the links to your YouTube channel on the description below, and everyone can sort of keep an eye on that and have a look and see what's going on in Kenya in regards to that. Because clearly, I don't think this is going away anytime soon. Elections are coming up soon, and we all know how they love to hog on to one issue and keep driving it as an election mode. So this will be ongoing for a while. So yeah, I think just to sort of round everything up, one thing I want to find out from you, I know you spent a bit of time in England. I think you were in New York, the great city of York.
Yes.
And I'm just keen, really, in your time in England, how long were you in England, by the way?
I was only there for 1 year. Between September 2019 and September 2020.
That's a very long time. A year is a long time. And in a long time, I think one can be able to observe what's going on in a lot of things. So my question to you and my challenge to you is, what did you see, learn in England that you'd readily implement in Kenya or across some of the African countries?
The thing that
anything.
The thing that I really liked about England was the public transport system. I live in Nairobi, and Nairobi has traffic, like hell of a lot of traffic. And the thing that like really would help Nairobians is just a functioning public transport system that really allows us to have options, that is scheduled, that is cost effective. And I really think African countries would, especially the cities, would benefit from a really good public transport system. And I saw that working really well there. Even an inclusive public transport system that accommodates even people who are able differently, because I looked at the public transport system in Nairobi and I was just like, how is someone supposed to get through this with a wheelchair? Like it's physically impossible, really.
The matatus don't accommodate everyone, do they?
No, you're on your own. So that's something that I really admired there, that I would really readily implement here. Of course, now with our public transport system, it's not run by government, it's run by private sector-ish. And so there's obviously lots of interest in that area. So I understand the difficulty as to why we don't have a good public transport system. But that is something I would prioritize, really. It just makes people's lives easier. I don't have to leave my house 3 hours before I need to go. It just makes life a lot easier. So that's something I really observed, and I would readily implement it.
And I guess for those that are not in England, one thing that England a transport system is very good at is being militant, where if the bus is meant to be there 10 past 1, it will be there 10 past 1. Of course, traffic and all that, but in general, it will be on time.
Actually, York is a very small town, and I think the bus used to get late by like 3 minutes, and the complaint. I was like, 3 minutes, just chill. It's okay. I used to be very fascinated. I'd be like, this 3 minutes has ruined your life, eh? Okay.
And if you think how you can wait 2 hours for your matatu.
And no one has any apology.
You don't know when it's coming.
No one has an apology to give you. Yeah, so that's something that I desire for this place, for sure.
Well, no, I think I concur with you that even across the continent, that the transport system does need a serious look at. Even basic things such as having very well connected rail systems. Even air travel is almost difficult because it's either too expensive or they're not as frequent. It's just not working out. But you know what? Thank you very much for joining us. And everyone's heard it here that Nairobi will have an underground system, just like the London Underground sometime soon.
For sure. Watch the space.
No. No, thank you ever so much for joining us today, Suzanne. This has been amazing. Hopefully we'll get you on back again soon. And for those on Spotify, do you mind giving them your YouTube channel name?
So the name of the channel is called Is That So with Silantoi. So you can find that anywhere on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast from, Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor, anything. My Instagram is at Silantoi Suzanne, and my Twitter is also at Silantoi Suzanne. So follow me. I'll keep you posted.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Really appreciate this. Guys, it's Suzanne. It's Indaba, the African debate, and the debate does indeed continue. There is space for young African politicians, clearly. Maybe the future is now. Thank you very much for joining us, Suzanne.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in as always. I'll catch you next week, and all the best. Bye for now.